What was Neanderthal religion like? That's the big question. It's one of the deepest mysteries in human evolution. And the honest answer is we don't know for sure. We can't. There are no Neanderthal holy books, no stone tablets with commandments, no painted chapels telling the stories of their gods. All we have are their bones, their tools, and the traces they left in the dirt. Everything else is a guess. It's an educated guess, a piece of detective work 100,000 years after the fact, but it's still a guess. But that doesn't mean we have no clues. We have some powerful ones, and these clues hint at a world that was far from the brutish, mindless existence people once imagined. They hint at a mind that was grappling with the same big things we do: life, death, and what it all means. So instead of looking for a religion with a capital R like we have today, let's look for the seeds of it. Let's look for ritual, for symbolism, for a sense of a world beyond the purely practical. The most powerful evidence we have comes from how Neanderthals treated their dead. For most of animal history, when something died, it just died. It lay where it fell. It was eaten by scavengers or it rotted away, like it was just a body. But with Neanderthals, we start to see something different. We start to see burials. This is a huge leap. Digging a hole and placing a body inside is not a practical act. It takes time and a lot of energy. It doesn't help you find your next meal or protect you from a cave bear. It's something else. It's an act driven by emotion, by a sense of social connection, and maybe, just maybe, by a belief that the dead are not simply gone. And it suggests that a person was more than just their physical body. One of the most famous examples is a site in France called La Chapelle aux Saints. In 1908, archaeologists found the skeleton of an old Neanderthal man. He was old for his time, maybe in his 40s. His body was racked with arthritis, he had lost most of his teeth, and he had a healed bone fracture. This man could not have survived alone. He was cared for by his group. That alone tells you something profound about their social bonds and empathy. But it's how they found him that really matters. He wasn't just lying on the cave floor. He was in a pit, a rectangular hole that had been deliberately dug. He was laid on his back, with his head to the west, one arm bent. Rocks were placed over his head and chest, and a large bison leg was laid on top. Then the pit was filled in. For a long time, this was seen as the smoking gun. Proof of a Neanderthal burial ritual, a compassionate farewell to a cherished member of the clan. Of course, science is all about argument and reevaluation. Skeptics came along and asked tough questions. Was it really a dug grave, or just a natural depression in the cave floor? Did he fall in? Did the dirt just wash over him naturally over thousands of years? For decades, the debate raged. But more recent studies of the site have confirmed the original idea. The pit was not natural. It was man-made. The old man of La Chapelle was intentionally buried. Then there's Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq. This place is incredible. It was a home to Neanderthals for tens of thousands of years. And in it, archaeologists found the remains of 10 different Neanderthals. One of them, Shanidar one, was like the old man of La Chapelle, but even more so. He had a crushing blow to the side of his head when he was young that would have blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated above the elbow. He was lame and would have walked with a painful limp. And yet, he lived to be old. He was a severely disabled man who was fed, protected, and supported by his group for decades. This is a powerful testament to Neanderthal compassion. But another body in that cave, Shanidar 4, sparked one of the most romantic and controversial ideas about Neanderthals. When the skeleton was excavated in the 1960s, soil samples were taken from around the body. When they were analyzed, scientists found something amazing: clumps of pollen from at least 7 different types of flowers. These weren't just random flowers that grew in the cave, they were species like yarrow, cornflower, and hollyhock, plants known for their medicinal properties. The interpretation was beautiful. The Neanderthals had laid their companion to rest on a bed of flowers. It was a flower burial. This wasn't just getting rid of a body, this was a tender, symbolic ceremony. It suggested a deep sense of grief and a belief in something more. The image captured the public imagination. It helped transform the view of Neanderthals from knuckle-dragging brutes to sensitive, feeling beings. But again, the skeptics raised their voices, and they had a good point. Shanidar Cave is also home to a type of burrowing rodent called the Persian jerd. These jerds are known to bring flowers into their burrows and store them. Could it be that the pollen wasn't placed there by Neanderthals at all, but was brought in by rodents centuries or millennia later? The debate over the flower burial went back and forth for 50 years. Just recently, new excavations at Shanidar have breathed new life into the original idea. Researchers found more remains from the same spot as Shanidar 4, and they found more pollen clumps. But this time, the pollen was in distinct clusters, not just scattered about, suggesting they were placed there as whole flower heads. They also found bits of wood around the flowers, suggesting they might have been woven onto a branch. So, while the rodent theory isn't totally disproven, the evidence is leaning back towards an intentional symbolic act. These aren't isolated cases. At Kibara Cave in Israel, a Neanderthal man was found in a dug grave, but his head was missing. It seems to have been removed deliberately, sometime after death. Why? We see this in some modern human cultures, where the skull is kept as an object of veneration or memory. Could Neanderthals have been doing something similar? At Amud, also in Israel, a baby was buried with the jaw of a red deer placed on its pelvis. Was this a toy for the afterlife? A symbolic offering. These burials are our strongest, most direct evidence for a Neanderthal spiritual life. They show a clear and repeated pattern of behavior that goes beyond survival. They show a concern for the dead that implies a rich emotional and social world. It's a huge step to call this religion, but it is undeniably ritual, and ritual is where religion begins. It's the action you take when you feel something that words can't quite capture. But a spiritual life isn't just about death, it's about how you live. It's about symbolism, beauty, and identity. And we have evidence for this too. It's just debated, but just as tantalizing. Let's talk about color, specifically the color red. Archaeologists find lumps of ochre at many Neanderthal sites. And ochre is a natural clay earth pigment. It's basically a red or yellow rock that you can use to make color. They were clearly collecting it and processing it. But why? Sometimes it might have been used for practical things, like tanning hides or as an adhesive. But we often find it in contexts that don't seem practical. We find it associated with burials. We find it ground into a fine powder. The most likely use for this powdered ochre was as a body paint. Think about that. Painting your body is one of the most fundamentally human things we do. It has no practical purpose, it doesn't make you a better hunter, but it's a powerful statement. It can be for decoration, it can signify that you belong to a certain group. It can be used in a ceremony to mark a special occasion. It's a way of turning your own body into a symbol. If Neanderthals were painting themselves with red ochre, they weren't just surviving. They were communicating identity, they were expressing themselves, they were engaging in a form of art. And it wasn't just color, they made jewelry. At a site in Krapina, Croatia, archaeologists found a set of 8 white-tailed eagle talons. These weren't just random bones from a meal, they had multiple cut marks and polished areas that show they had been deliberately modified. They were likely strung together to be worn as a necklace or a bracelet. This is hugely significant. An eagle is not a chicken. It's a powerful, impressive, and dangerous predator. Wearing its talons isn't just a fashion statement. It's a symbol of power, of skill, of a connection to that magnificent animal. It's taking a piece of the natural world and giving it a new symbolic meaning. It shows abstract thought. This talon is no longer just a talon, it now represents something else, like strength or status. We see this elsewhere too. In caves in Spain, archaeologists found seashells, some of them naturally perforated, others with holes punched in them. They were covered in pigments, these were clearly beads, and they date to a time long before modern humans arrived in the area. These were Neanderthal creations. They were collecting beautiful objects, modifying them, and likely wearing them. This desire for adornment, for beauty, is another building block of a complex symbolic culture. There's also evidence they were interested in feathers. At several sites we find the wing bones of birds, especially large raptors and corvids like crows and ravens. What's interesting is that the cut marks on the bones show that they were carefully removing the long primary flight feathers. These birds aren't very meaty, so they probably weren't hunting them for food. They were hunting them for their feathers, and they were specifically targeting birds with large, dark, visually striking feathers. Again, this points to decoration, to costume, to ceremony. Imagine a Neanderthal shaman or leader adorned with a necklace of eagle talons, their body painted with red ochre, and dark raven feathers in their hair. Suddenly, their world seems much richer and more complex. So we have evidence for how they treated their dead and how they decorated their living. But what about sacred spaces? Places set aside for something other than just eating and sleeping. For a long time, we thought this was something only modern humans did. We were the ones with the spectacular cave art. Neanderthals, we thought, just lived in the front of their caves, and that was it. Then, a discovery in a cave in Bruniquel, France, changed everything. Deep inside the cave, more than 300 meters from the entrance in total darkness, is a man-made structure. It's made from stalagmites, the rock formations that grow up from the cave floor. Someone, a long time ago, broke off hundreds of these stalagmites and arranged them into two large rings. There are also several smaller piles of stalagmites. In various places, there are traces of fire, not for light or cooking, but perhaps for some other purpose. The structure is bizarre and mysterious. It's not a shelter, it's not a pen for animals. It's deep underground in a place that would have been difficult and dangerous to get to. It would have taken a lot of effort and cooperation from a whole group to build. It feels like a special place, a place set apart. And the most incredible thing is its age. That scientists dated the structure to around 176,000 years ago. That is staggeringly old. Modern humans weren't in Europe back then. The only people who could have built it were Neanderthals. What were they doing down there? We have no idea. Was it a ritual chamber? A place for initiation ceremonies for their young? A place to connect with the spirits of the underworld? We will never know. But we do know that they were organized, they were cooperative, and they were venturing into the deep, dark places of the earth to build something that had no obvious practical function. It feels like a sanctuary. It feels sacred. All of this evidence, the burials, the ornaments, the mysterious cave structures, points to a mind that was capable of symbolic and abstract thought. But could they really have had a belief system? Did they have the mental hardware for it? For a long time, the assumption was no. Neanderthals were often depicted with a sloping forehead, which people took to mean they had a less developed frontal lobe, the part of the brain associated with planning and abstract thought. But we now know their brains were just as large as ours, sometimes even larger. The shape was different, but the size was there. A more important question is language. Religion almost always relies on shared stories, myths, and instructions. You can't pass on a complex belief system with just grunts and gestures. You need language. Did Neanderthals have it? The evidence is mounting that they did. We found the hyoid bone of a Neanderthal. This is a small bone in the throat that supports the tongue and is crucial for speech. The Neanderthal hyoid bone is virtually identical to ours. Genetically, we know they had the same version of the FOXP2 gene that we do, a gene strongly linked to the ability to produce and process language. Their inner ear structure was also tuned to hear the same frequencies as modern human speech. It's very likely they had complex vocal communication. We don't know what their language sounded like or how complex it was, but they could almost certainly talk. They also seem to have had what psychologists call a theory of mind. This is the ability to understand that other individuals have their own minds, with their own intentions, feelings, and beliefs. The evidence for them caring for the severely disabled, like at Shanidar and La Chapelle, strongly suggests they had empathy. They could understand the suffering of another and act to relieve it. This ability to see the world from another's perspective is a crucial stepping stone to imagining non-human minds, like the spirits of animals or the forces of nature. So, what do we get when we put all these pieces together? We get a picture not of a specific Neanderthal religion, but of a Neanderthal spirituality. It was probably not an organized system with priests and temples. It was likely something more personal, more local, and more entwined with the natural world. It was probably a form of animism. This is the belief, common to many hunter-gatherer cultures, that everything has a spirit or a life force. Not just humans and animals, but also trees, rivers, mountains, and even rocks. The world wasn't a collection of dead objects. It was a living, breathing community of spirits. If you believe this, you wouldn't just kill a deer. You would kill a fellow spirit, and you would need to do it respectfully, perhaps with a ritual of thanks. This would explain the special treatment of certain animal parts, like the bison leg at La Chapelle or the eagle talons at Carpina. These weren't just objects, they were conduits to the spirit of that animal. Their world would have been filled with meaning. The hunt wasn't just about getting food, it was a sacred dialogue with the animal spirits. The changing seasons weren't just a meteorological event, they were a drama of cosmic forces. Sickness wasn't just a biological process, it could be the result of a displeased spirit. Death, in this worldview, would not be an ending, it would be a transition. The body might be gone, but the spirit moves on to another place or remains here in another form. This would explain the burials. You bury the body with care, not just out of love for the person who died, but out of respect for their lingering spirit. You might place tools or a piece of meat with them to help them on their journey. You might arrange them in a fetal position, as we see in some Neanderthal graves, as a symbol of rebirth into a new life. This kind of spirituality is tied to place. The mysterious structure at Bruniquel Cave wasn't built to be a universal cathedral. It was a special place for that specific group of Neanderthals. Other groups would have had their own sacred places, a particular rock formation, a large tree, a waterfall. Their beliefs would have been woven into the landscape they inhabited. We must be careful not to just project the beliefs of modern hunter-gatherers onto Neanderthals. They were a different species with a different evolutionary history. Their minds may have worked in ways we can't fully comprehend. But the clues suggest they were on a similar path. They were intelligent beings trying to make sense of a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. So, what was Neanderthal religion like? We can't know the names of their spirits or the words of their prayers. We can't hear the creation myths whispered around a flickering fire. All of that is lost to time. But we can see the echoes of their spiritual lives. We see it in a handful of flowers placed on a dead friend. We see it in the glint of a polished eagle claw. We see it in the red dust of ochre that once colored their skin. We see it in the strange silent rings of stone deep beneath the earth. These things tell us that Neanderthals were not just surviving. They were searching for meaning. They looked at the world and saw more than just rocks and meat. They saw symbols, power, and mystery. They felt grief, love, and awe. They grappled with the finality of death and chose to respond not with indifference, but with ritual. That impulse to look at the vast, silent universe and try to find our place in it, to answer the question of why, is one of the most fundamental things about being human. The evidence, faint and fragmented as it is, tells us that we were not the first to ask these questions. The Neanderthals, our long-lost cousins, were asking them too. Their religion was likely a world of spirits, of rituals tied to the hunt and the seasons, of a deep connection to their land and their kin. It was the beginning of our own long search for meaning.